Okay, so here we are, still in Chapter 7, a lot to do in Chapter 7, and we're still on right now the phase for this cash flow producing property of managing it and maintaining it. And as promised, what I want to do in this module is spring right into the Excel that I've developed for managing this property and make sure that we can all understand and compute all of the required quantities. Okay, so I'm in the Chapter 7 spreadsheet on the operate ratios cell DCF value page. And I'm going to start right up at the top. And the first thing I want to do is compute the effective gross income for years 2, 3, 4, 5. And remember, for year 1, we have already done that for the cap rate based purchase. Okay, so what am I going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is be kind of sneaky. You can see here that the columns go from A to E. So clearly I've hidden columns B, C, D. So I'm going to unhide these guys. Blammo. Okay, there we go. And this is going to help me get the information that I need to project all these numbers forward to year 5 without having to bounce back all the time to the base data spreadsheet. And you can see that all of these numbers do refer to the appropriate number on the base data spreadsheet. Okay, so starting with gross rent, their assumption, optimistic assumption, is that the uh, gross rent is going to grow by 8% a year. Okay, so in year 2, it's going to be equal to year 1 times 1 plus that 8%. And I do want to lock that down, so I'll hit function F4 on a Windows PC, and I get that. Okay, and then next step, the vacancy rate is assumed to be in every year 5% of the gross rent for that year. So I'm going to say equal to this, and I'll lock it down again. You never want to hard code these numbers. Hard code would mean typing 5% in there directly. You always want to refer to this variable over here in B7, because then when your managing director says that vacancy rate is wrong, it should be 6%, you can correct it with confidence to make sure that you're not making a mistake. Okay, and that will be corrected everywhere automatically. Um, so we have our 5% of the gross rent. Okay, and I do need to be careful with signs here. So that's going to be a subtraction. And my other income is assumed to be 6% of the gross rent for the year. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in, and that is a positive number. Looks to me like these are all very general numbers. This is, of course, just a summation of the 3 numbers above it. Looks to me like this is all very general, so I can copy these all over. Blammo. And now I'm going to cheat again a little bit. I do have conveniently the correct numbers over here, and everything looks good. Okay. All right, so now on to the operating expenses we need, including the non-CapEx maintenance here. And I'm not going to do all the numbers for us, but I'm just going to do property tax. All the other numbers work pretty similarly. So we'll go from there. So again, this first column is already done for the cap rate based purchase, except this number is a little different because we assumed 1/40th of purchase price, and now here we're using 1/30th. Okay, so we're assuming that the property tax is going to grow in each year by 7% a year. So that means that the property tax in year 2 is going to be the property tax in year 1 times 1 plus this 7%. And again, I want to lock that down with the dollar signs. Okay, and that's pretty general formula. So I just drag that over. Might want to check this. I still want to make sure that I'm referring to D11 for my percent increase, even in year 5. So I do that, and once again, I go ahead and cheat. Okay, number looks good to me. Um, and Let's compute one more. Okay, so we get all these expenses, and we subtract all of these expenses from the EGI, and that gives us our NOI. But I want to get to before tax cash flows. So what's the other thing that the sponsor is going to have to pay before the not including the taxes before we get to their after tax cash flow? And that's, of course, the mortgage payment. Where do I get my beautiful mortgage payment? Well, I'm going to have to go over to the purchase spreadsheet where we've already worked it out. So I go over to the purchase spreadsheet, and the mortgage payment, I always like to point to the most cardinal appearance of a number that appears many times. What I mean by that is in cell J51 is where we determined for the first time that the annual payment was actually 89,289. So I want to point back to that. There's nothing wrong with, you could point here, you could point anywhere else, pretty much that number applies, but good technique to always take the first instance or the cardinal instance of where that number appears. Okay, so I say equal purchase J51 here, and I think I could do two things. I could lock this down, and let me not lock it down. And whoops, what happened there? Um, I think I have the wrong thing here. Let's try that again. Equals. There we go. I don't know what I had wrong there, but um, anyway, so this again, I have to be careful with signs now, right? So the mortgage is a cash flow out to the owner, so I'm going to put a negative number in there. And now watch, if I just pull this over, it may or may not be right because I haven't locked this down. So what I'm going to do here in this case is I'm just going to say in year 2, because I know it's equal, just going to say it's equal to what we had in year 1 because I know I have those constant mortgage payments. And then I just drag it over. And in year 5, you see it says equal to year 4 equal to year 3, etc., etc., etc. This is still very, very, very general. If I change this one, they're all going to change. Okay, so let's do, once again, a little bit of cheating. Okay, everything looks good. Okay, so you do need to be able to, there are a lot of numbers here, you do need to be able to generate this whole thing from scratch yourself without headings, without yellow blocks, without anything. That's where we're going in this course, and in your more advanced courses, that's what you're always going to have to do, just build everything from scratch. Okay, um, so now what do I want to do? I want to compute my tax so that I can get after tax cash flows to the owner, because that's what I'm going to need to use when I get my complete comprehensive cash flows for this project and compute an NPV for this project to see if it's good or not. Okay, so my depreciation, yikes, what do we do for depreciation? Okay, I'm going to jump back to base data, and hopefully here I'm going to see my 27.5. Yeah, here we go. I've got my tax quantities in base data, and depreciable life of building is 27.5. So we're going to have a constant amount, 1/27.5 of the price they paid for the building each year. All right, so let's see if we can go back and do this now. So I want to say equal minus, it'll be a minus number. So I have to get the purchase price of the building. And this is the total purchase price. The IRS does not care about your financing terms, any of that junk. Just what was paid for the building here, which is that. And I want to say divided by that 27.5. And again, I'm not hard coding in any of these numbers. That's a really bad technique. Okay, and blammo, I've got that. And now, if I just drag this along, it's going to be horrible, right? Because I haven't locked any of this down. So I could lock it down, and that would be great, and then just drag it over. But once again, I'm just going to choose to say, because I know this is constant, that's what straight line depreciation means. The depreciation expense in every year is constant. So I'm just going to say what happens in year 2 is the same as year 1. And now I have a general formula. Drag that over to year 5. And now, of course, once again, I'm going to cheat in a way that you cannot on an exam. Um, but good to do when you're doing homework to make sure that things are going as they should be. Okay, now I need to get the interest payment for each year. Where do I get the interest payment? Well, I've got to go back to purchase where we worked out all of the details of the purchase and the mortgage. And I'm just going to go to that roll forward mortgage table for the owner, and that has in it the interest paid each year. Okay, so I'm in year 1 now. It's important to keep your wits about you about which year you're dealing with. So I'm in year 1, which is when they pay their first interest payment for a mortgage, um, end of year 1. Okay, so I'm going to go back over to purchase. I'm going to find this beautiful mortgage roll forward table for the owner. This is all the lender stuff. Lender, lender, lender. Here it is. Equities, loan, interest amortization table. This is the table that I'm looking for. And here's the interest payment for year 1. And you see how it's going down. And there we go. And important now to think about signs. Um, this is going to be a deduction, so that's good. Negative good in this case. I want to make this a negative number because like depreciation, is going to be a deduction. And now I do want to just pull this over to reflect the number for each year in that table on the other page. Okay, so my NOI minus my depreciation, which is an awesome help, okay, minus my interest payment gives me my taxable income. Okay, that's what the owners are going to have to pay tax on for operating the property each year. Um, and 25% of that is going to be that the tax they pay. We're assuming the owners of this LLC are in the 25% tax bracket. So 25% times 47,000 is 12,000 roughly, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to continue cheating here, make sure everything looks good. Okay, which it does. All right, and the before tax cash flow just comes from up above minus our taxes. So I want to say equal minus. Again, here signs are very important, right? Our before tax cash flow to owners minus our taxes. The only thing left is our after tax cash flow to the owners. So that's looking pretty good to me. Now I have all of these cash flows that I can use when we ultimately get an NPV for this project. And to do that, we're going to need to know the after-tax cash flow when they sell the property, and we're also going to have to include the cash flow when they buy the property. Okay, but we're not quite there yet. So once again, I'm cheating. Okay, that looks good. All right, and now let's go on to operating ratios, so they can do two things with these ratios. Make sure their model makes sense. Okay, good way to find errors in your model here. Let's say three things. Make sure your model makes sense. Check your assumptions. Are they really good or are they quixotic? Are they too optimistic? Um, and the third thing is to just help you understand what's going on with this property financially. How could you maybe do better, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so rent received over gross rent. So we're just going to do this for every year, okay? The rent that we receive is equal to, and I'm going to use a parentheses here because I know I'm going to need it. The rent received is, of course, the gross rent minus the vacancy rate. Okay. Um, and that's my rent received. I want to divide that by gross rent, so I divide that by F6. Whoops, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong thing in here. F6. Sorry about that. It should this should definitely. I know I have a mistake here because this should definitely be less than 100%. So let's go ahead and fix that. Oh, okay. The reason that I have a problem here is because of my signs. All right. The vacancy rate is negative. Minus minus is plus. So I'm just going to say plus here and whammo. Now it's looking pretty good. 95%. Okay. And because our vacancy rate is 5% each year, I should be able to just pull this over and get 95% for each year. So I know I haven't made a mistake there. So that's good. So my NOI over my EGI, that's very easy. I just go up and find my NOI and divide that by my EGI. This is a helpful number. This would be a very helpful number if we didn't have a mortgage. When we do have a mortgage, and whether or not we have a mortgage, the one ratio that's really, really helpful is always after-tax cash flow over effective gross income. All right, so I'll wait on pulling this over until I have all the rest of the ratios here. Interest over EGI, again, very easy. We're just picking up numbers that we've already created and making ratios out of them and just thinking about them a little bit. Okay, so this one is again interest over EGI, so I've got to find my interest. Here's my interest. I'm remembering that's a negative number, so I'm not going to run into trouble this time. Over where is my beautiful EGI for year one? Okay, there we go. And I'm going to say minus here just so I get a positive ratio, and that's looking good. Okay, after-tax cash flow over EGI is going to be equal to my after-tax cash flow in F31 divided by my friend EGI here in F9, and those are both positive numbers, so that should be good. So one up, that says F9, that is so wrong. Okay, so I need this to be F31 over F9. I don't know what I did wrong, but clearly that made no sense. So that's looking good. That 37% is correct, I believe. And our tax over our taxable income, this should be, if they remain in the 25% tax bracket for all 5 years, should be 25% each time. So this, again, just a quick check. So let's get to our tax here, and here's our taxable income here, and that better be 25% for all 5 years. Now I think I have very general ratios here. I can drag them all over, which I do right there, and because they have rents growing at 8% and expenses growing, operating expenses growing at 7%, I do expect my NOI over EGI ratio to be growing, which it is. My interest over EGI I expect to be declining, right? Because of what's going on with the interest and the EGI. The EGI is getting bigger each year and the interest is getting smaller each year. So I do expect that to decline for both of those reasons. And my after-tax cash flow over EGI should be increasing because, again, my expenses are increasing less rapidly at 7% than my gross rent and my EGI at 8%. All right, so these are all looking good to me, and you should definitely follow this. Make sure you can duplicate this. You will have a homework that is similar to this, and you will definitely have an exam that is similar to this without all of the hand holding. Okay, so I'm going to make you do a lot of this stuff from scratch going forward to make sure that you really understand it. Okay. Um, and with that, I think once again, I will say sayonara for now.